morning everybody. I'm going to make this quick because I want to just talk about shots that I wasn't expecting. So today I had a theme in mind. I got up at 4 AM, got here far too early, probably spent best part of 45 minutes sat in the van watching YouTube videos, just waiting for it to come light. And I've wandered into the woods in almost darkness, let's say, certainly too dark to video, and I've just been hanging around, and one or two images have presented themselves. This here is one of them which I really wasn't expecting. I've walked up this footpath so many times I really can't remember, but because of the low levels of lightning, a little bit of mist in the air this morning, this scene has just presented itself, and I've just never noticed it any other time. It's because the light levels are so low that it really has enabled me to pick it out this morning. So that's an interesting one for me. You've just really got to be switched on to the fact that what might seem quite mundane in an ordinary daylight situation can be quite picturesque very early on in the morning when you least expect it. So I'm going to quickly talk you through the back of the camera now before it gets too light, because you're really going to see it in these conditions to appreciate it, and then I'll get on with the main theme of the film of today. So like I say, I'm going to be quick here because I am losing the mist a little bit. So this is the footpath scene as I was presented with it as I walked up the hill, and it was the light at the far distance, sort of obviously here, this gap here, that really drew me in, and this branch over the top here, there we go, that one there, is what's helping to really focus your attention down to that central part of the frame. What I've done with the camera is I've gone in, I've zoomed in, as you can see it's now taking shape, move the camera down a little bit and just zoom in to about there, and just move it to the left a little bit, because that tree on the right isn't really adding much value. We have lost a bit of the mist now, and that's the composition as I saw. Now you can see there's a natural vignette occurring on the edges of the frame, bottom left, bottom right, top left. There's a bit of brightness on the top right, and that caused me some trouble. I'll show you on the back of the camera now the image that I took, and then I'll put the completed image on afterwards. So here we have the scene on the back of the camera. As you can see, the long lens that I've got on at the moment, so I say long lens, it's on about 80mm, so certainly longer than a standard 50mm lens, has really captured that central portion of the frame. You can see the tree on the top here, this branch just forming the frame, then you've got a second beech tree just helping to hold that left hand side together, and an old wall on the left hand side that's derelict as well, just leading the eye into that central area. Now on the camera you can see that at the moment I'm on 9.5 f number, 13 seconds at 100 ISO. I have brightened this up. You can see that it's plus 1 stop at the moment. When I took the picture, I took it round about the -1 stop. Now what I will say is that the video camera isn't picking up the shadow detail at the moment, but you can see how by lowering that exposure that I've made the distance a bit more moody and a bit more appealing to the viewer. It sort of draws your eye into that central section. But the surrounding parts of the image are more like what you see now. Like I say, the dynamic range of the video camera really isn't picking that up. But if you imagine the lightness of the surrounding vegetation and then the central portion being something like that, and those two images merged together, is what the final frame will look like. Now what I will say is, if you look top right of the camera, you can see where the light is bleeding in through the trees on the right. You can see that I've got some flare, and it's sort of representing in a sort of bluey cast. So all I did during the exposure is I just put my hand over that corner ever so slightly, just to darken in and get rid of that bit of a problem there on the right hand side. So I'll put that image on now. It's a funny old morning this morning. This is another location I've walked past dozens of times, and for whatever reason today it's really jumped out at me, and I've lined the video camera up in a complementary composition so that you could see how I would compose the scene. Got a lovely bank in here falling away to the right hand side, leading your eye to this beautiful beech tree on the right here. The woodland receding into the distance, and look at all these lovely golden tones all around the base of the frame on both sides of the river. Really complementary composition. Granted, the conditions aren't overly favourable this morning. The whole thing would benefit hugely from some atmosphere, but the way that it's all lined up, the trees on the left here, and you know, the stream bed running through the central portion, are so complementary, and everything just sits so comfortably. It just needs that atmosphere just to lift it to the next level. And that brings me on to the theme of today's video, which is all about scoring your images. Now, if you're familiar with the channel, you'll know that I score my images regularly from 1 through to 5, and when I'm doing one-to-one sessions, this is something that we focus on, whether it be in the field, on a face-to-face, or during remote learning using Zoom calls, etc. And I try to get people to understand the difference between the different levels of shots from 1 right through to 5, and that's what I'm hoping that I'm going to talk you through this morning. I'm going to find a series of images. I'm not going to make it too difficult for myself because it really is about illustrating where those numbers fall in terms of the quality of the shots. So I'll get the bag and we'll go and have a wander somewhere else now and see if I can find a couple of shots. I must admit, the shot that falls within the 1 star, which almost certainly goes straight in the recycle bin, shouldn't be too difficult to find. They would literally be everywhere, but I'm going to give some consideration towards that to try and show the type of images that I would consider a 1 star that someone may take. Chances are that most of you would know an image that would fall within a 1 star category, but it starts getting a little bit more difficult when we get to 2 and 3 star, and separating those out. And then of course the 3 and 4s, and the 4s when they become a 5 is really a lottery, but I'll explain a little bit more about that in a little while. So there is a bit of mist still hanging around. Now, I have to say that the forecast for today is to be quite sunny, and at the moment when I look up there's no clouds around at all. It's only because I'm in a bit of a river valley that I'm in quite a lot of shade at the moment. But I have found my first 1 star image. Now, I'm trying to be realistic about this. I'm trying to replicate a situation where an image like this might be taken. I mean, I could literally just point the camera willy-nilly anywhere, but that's not what people generally do when they're first starting out in photography. So I'm trying to make a realistic mistake here for the type of image that, like I say, you'll get back to your PC, wonder where you've gone wrong, and be not quite sure, and just press that delete key. Now, I am using a woodland floor image for this because it's generally the sort of thing that is most easily accessible and proves that point quite well. Now, you could use general landscape images to illustrate this, but I think keeping it simple it'll not get too complicated as to why it's deemed a 1 star image. So hopefully I will illustrate that now. I have to say, this is really not easy. Even in trying to recreate a 1 star image, I'm naturally gravitating towards correcting compositions and putting things correctly in the frame. I've been doing this so long now that there's to a large extent, a lot of the prep work I do without even thinking about it. So I'm trying my best to make the mistakes, the really early on mistakes that we make as photographers. Now, I'm assuming that most of you that are interested in this type of video will be using a tripod. Not everybody does. It's not essential necessarily, but it does pave the way for a lot more scope for experimentation and a lot more different subjects, certainly in poor light when you're going to struggle for those long exposures. Yes, you can increase the ISO, the sensitivity of the sensor for those darker conditions, but there becomes a point where you literally can't handhold the camera anymore. And a lot of my shots are taken at 20 seconds exposure. So with that in mind, I'm assuming that most people are going to be wanting to use a tripod. So I've lined this first shot up, and it's literally this little area in front of me here, and it's just trying to take a nice woodland forest floor scene. So I'll get the video camera on the back of this now, and I'll just talk you through the composition and the mistakes that I would certainly class this image as a 1-star image. Right, so we've got the image bottom right there on the back of the LCD, and I'll pop the process version on the left hand side so you can see in a bit more detail. The first issue with this particular shot is the settings. Now I'm on 100 ISO, perfectly fine with that. A 2-second exposure, perfectly fine with that as well, because we're on the tripod. The problem first of all would be f4.5. The lens is not as sharp as it could be at 4.5. We're not trying to exaggerate some atmosphere like fog or mist, so I would generally want to put that, stop that down to something like about f11. Once we're getting really close, we start to think about focus stacking, but for something like this I wouldn't need to focus stack. It would just be fine on a straight shot. f11, anything up to f16 will be absolutely fine. I'll just get rid of that information so we can look at the composition. So what I've tried to do here is I've tried to simulate perhaps an individual that gets the scene, wanted to do a forest floor shot, and saw this sycamore leaf on the left hand side here, and maybe this little branch here on the right hand side. Now to me, we've got an issue with 2 items in the frame, one bouncing from one to the other. Yes, you could argue there's a little bit of a lead in between the two, but where it's leading to, which will be the stick in this instance, is just not that appealing to the eye. Overall, the collection of leaves are very, very small in the frame. They're not at a distance that's complementary. There's too many of them, they're too messy, there's lots of stalks everywhere all around the image. And it's just that sycamore leaf is getting lost. It's also parked right down in the lower left hand side of the frame. This stick is just not a nice feature whatsoever. And also in the top right hand corner we've got the bank showing as well. So quite a messy composition that really needs a lot of work to make it more coherent. So with that in mind, we will move on to what may be considered a number 2 image. So I think we've got the makings of a 3-star image here, and I'm pleased I found this, because I didn't want it all to be about the close-up shots, because I appreciate that not everybody does the macro stuff or the intimate scenes like I do, and it's nice to be able to show the scoring system at play with a broader scene. So as I've walked through here, I've naturally been drawn to this little characterful oak tree on the right hand side, and the general instinct is to get a photograph of it. We see lots of beautiful images of woodland, and they feature characters just like this in them, and we're certainly drawn to them as photographers, and we try to make images of them regardless of the problems all around them. So I'll get the camera up now and I'll set this up. So I've lined the little video camera up directly beneath the legs of the stills camera, so they're both seeing pretty much the same composition. So what we've got, as I said, we've got this old oak on the right hand side, and we've got a nice big grand sycamore, mature sycamore on the left. So there's clearly a relationship between these two features, and this is where it becomes tempting to start looking for titles with images such as the grand, straight, perfectly conditioned tree, and the old twisty character that's had a tough life, let's say, whereas this one's had it nice and easy. It's been able to grow tall in the canopy and create titles around that, and get too wrapped up in all that sort of thing and not be focusing on the finer points of a composition. It's just so easy just to be tunnel visioned about those two elements and miss all the other things that are creating havoc within the scene and what lower it from a 4 down to a 3 and maybe even a 2. I think this is probably a 2, getting up towards a 3, but not quite so bad that I would say it's a 2. The problems that I see it are this branch here, or this stem here, and this stem at the back. They tend to merge together on the frame. They look like two, like they're almost together almost, and they're just straight, unsightly parts of the frame, and I'm not keen on them at all. On the right hand side you've got a tree growing there that's just not complementary to the scene. It's not very characterful at all. And then of course you've got the big scar of the pathway running through the centre. There is another merit, I will say, is that at the moment we've got some soft diffuse light and that's filtering through the trees, and that's quite nice. So you've got that which is pretty decent on the frame, and these two main features left and right here, and it's those better qualities that can lead us into a false sense of security when we're framing our images. So we've really got to be mindful of these problem areas and not just sort of gloss over them in favour of these more interesting parts. So I'm going to take the image now and with the stills camera and just put that on. Really keeping my eyes peeled for that number 5-star image this morning. It could potentially happen. There's mist still hanging around. It's very, very light, and there's some lovely light filtering through it, just making this lovely soft appearance to the landscape in the woodland. An image like this certainly catches your eye. Beautiful beech trees in the background just spreading around with their canopies, but we can't avoid the fact that the foreground, the banking is just unsightly, and that's what makes the difference between something that we might want to set up our cameras on and something that we just simply walk past. But really beautiful to witness this morning. Such a lovely atmosphere in the wood. Anyway, onward with the search. Oh, I've never been more confused than I am right now. I found what I considered to be a shot that really illustrated a 3 all day long. But when I set the video camera up, it actually looked nicer than what it did to my eye, which I suppose proves the point that it's always good to evaluate your scene through the camera rather than with the naked eye. It's all about this here, which is an alder, and a birch on the right, and you got this little fella in the middle, which is also a birch, and they're my main 3 components of the shot. And of course we got some lovely light filtering through from behind, and I'm not sure whether it's showing at this moment in time, but it was misty as well, quite a bit of mist about. Now when I got the video camera up, it seemed to cut through all that mist quite massively, really, in that it made the composition a lot more appealing than what I first thought. With the stills camera, I mean, it's quite an old, they're old lenses that I use, and in good light, good consistent light, they're absolutely untouchable. But when you get things like lens flare, or the light coming into the lens at quite strong angles into the lens, they really do struggle to cope with that light hitting the front element, and you get a lot more flare than sometimes you would like. Sometimes it can work to your advantage if you've got, let's say, a misty woodland and you've got light coming in, it can actually accentuate that. But I wanted to remove some of that. The polarizer wouldn't do it because the light's coming directly towards the camera, so I did think about that at first. Now, when I say this is a 3, I'm going to put on the image that I took with my stills camera, my main camera, and I focused in quite close on that tree and the birch over there, and it's quite a tight crop, but I made it quite high key to sort of make it a bit more dynamic, a bit more exciting. Now, the reasons I say it was a 3, and I say it all day long, is because at the end of the day there's no visual journey. It's quite a flat image. It's a nice image, it's visually appealing, but it doesn't hold your interest. Once you've sort of seen the main components of the frame, there's nothing else for you to look at, and it is just all about the 2 trees and the one in the middle, and arguably the one in the middle isn't that appealing to look at. So I'll put that image on now. Like I say, it's a high key effect, and the high key effect is to try and lift the image beyond what it already is, but you can't get away from the fact that it is very two-dimensional, very flat, and it's heavily dependent on just the lighting conditions, and for that reason I would give it a 3, and it wouldn't go beyond that. I'll put that on now. Now I'm going to follow that because I think it'll be an interesting exercise. I'm going to follow that with the little video camera that I use. It's a slightly broader scene. It's a 16:9 crop, and on the back of the LCD it looks hugely better than what my main stills camera does. So I'm going to process both these images. I've taken a proper stills camera on a raw file with the video camera just to compare that. Now I must say that the video camera I'm using is the Canon M50, and from a sensor point of view, it's a decent sensor. It's got quite a good dynamic range for photography, not so good for video. But like I say, I've done the same thing. It's more of a high key effect, but it seems somehow to have cut through a lot of the flare that I'm getting with the main stills camera. So I'll put that on now. Bearing in mind, the first one is definitely a 3. I'm going to leave the judgment of the one from the Canon M50 up to you to decide what star you would give that, between 1 and 5. So I'll put that on now. So very bottom right of frame is a fungus called honey fungus. It's really common here in the UK, and I'm sure it is in other countries. I've photographed it before, but I don't think I've ever photographed it on this channel. Now this is a good illustration of a 2 as far as I'm concerned. There's lots of problems with it, but there's every reason why it will catch someone's eye as a potential subject. Now on this occasion I did think it would be good if I could turn a 2 into a 4 by doing 1 or 2 things, tweaking a couple of things and going at different angles, etc. But as much as I tried, I couldn't get anything better from it. It all falls down to the way that the group is growing, and 1 or 2 bits of eaten bits by slugs and bits that have been knocked off, and I just couldn't get a really good composition that would raise the bar to a 4. So I'm going to leave it. This one is a 2 no matter what I try. I can't get it any better. I'll talk you through the composition now, and you can see how I arrived at that score for this particular composition. So there we have the live view of the image as I've just taken it, and the stills frame that I've processed off to the top left there. Now, it is without a doubt an impressive group, and I could see why someone would be drawn to this group of mushrooms. It's very striking, and if you've not seen a lot of fungi and you're new to photography, then it's something that you're just going to gravitate towards. Photographically, the reasons this fails is because whilst I've gone in quite tight on the group to focus on it, which makes it more of a representational type shot, it is a little bit too tight overall. It's sort of fallen between two camps really. You either go in very close and just use sort of an abstract of all the caps and the stipes, or stems as they're otherwise known, and make something pictorial of it, or you pull out and have more of an environmental shot. Now the big issue with this one is, again, like one of the last ones where I used it potentially to my advantage, is the lens flare coming in from behind the main trunk which the mushrooms are growing from. That's degrading the image significantly. You've got this sort of pale wash over the whole image. Now you can increase the contrast in post-processing to get rid of that, but no amount of post-processing really substitutes the need for getting things right when you're out on location. You've also got quite a hot spot at the top there on the moss, and the woodland floor at the base down here obviously is very unsightly. It's just dirty brown, lots of decaying leaf matter, and what we're really left with here is just a representation of honey fungus growing in the woodland. One thing I would say that could improve the whole shot is the removal of this moss that's sort of fallen between the caps here. I'm not going to pull on it now because it's attached to the top, but you could carefully exclude that and it would tidy the composition up ever so slightly. But all in all, I would score that as a 2. There's obviously a bit of a grey area where 1s become 2s and 2s become 3s, and you know, you could have intermediate scoring between those, but I tend to stick, if I can, to the 1, 2, 3, and sorry, we should put that back on, the 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So let's go now and try my hardest at this time of the day, which we're getting some quite hot spots now in the woodland, to try and find myself a 4. So the time is now 10:30. I've been on the go since, well, I left the house about 4:30 this morning, having got up at 4 o'clock. And even now, 2nd of September, the light is pretty harsh at this time of day, and the woodland is notoriously difficult because of all the dapple light, and you also get lots of the green colour cast filtering through to the images, and you can correct that in post-processing, but I would always rather get it right in camera. So I've decided to call it and just show a couple of past images that illustrate what I consider to be 4-star images, and clearly 5-star images were going to be a struggle today. They really do come along very, very infrequently, and even the 4-star images, as I've found today, I have not come across one yet. So the first image I want to show you, which is a 4-star, I'll put it on now, is one that I took a couple of videos ago, and it's of a simple sycamore leaf, or 2 sycamore leaves together. And if you've not seen that video, I'll put a link above to it now. This image is a 4 in my book all day long. There is virtually nothing to criticise about the image. I'm really struggling to find anything at all that I have a problem with. You could argue that there are 1 or 2 little holes in the leaves, but you know, that's a natural process of decay within leaves, and I think it's acceptable. It's got such a lot of beauty as this image. The colours are complementary, the patterns are complementary, the shaping of the leaves are complementary, but you've got to ask yourself, why is this image a 4 and not a 5? And I suppose it's very subjective, things like this, because it all depends on the individual. To some this might be a 5, but to me it's what I call bread and butter shots. These are images that when I'm doing a YouTube film, 3s are what I try to get regularly, 4s are what I really try to get within most films if I can. So they're not that unachievable. and I expect to get them on a fairly frequent basis. So that is without doubt a 4 in my book, no problem at all. And like I said, some of you will think it's a 5, and that's fine. It's entirely up to the individual how you grade your own images. Now, in terms of images that I classify as 5s, and when I think of images that score of 5 stars, are images that could potentially win a competition. Now these images are so rare, 1 or 2 a year if you're lucky, 2 a year if you're lucky. And the thing is with images that score 5-star is that, again, they are subjective, and in a competition environment you could have a panel of judges that all, without a shadow of a doubt, love it and it would win or place quite highly, or you could have 1 or 2 judges that like it but some don't. And I'm going to show you 2 illustrations now of images which appeal to a broader spectrum of viewers, and then an image that doesn't necessarily so, but it pushes the boundaries a little bit where it could actually become a competition winner. And the first shot I took a little while ago in the Peak District, and it's this beautiful image of 2 beech trees almost dancing together, one of them with its arms stretched out, just welcoming in the autumn period. Now this image is very, very representational. It is exactly what I saw on the day, and anybody walking through the woodland stood at the side of me would have seen the same scene, no question about it. When you look at this image, there's so little, if anything, to criticise about it. Like I said, some people will be a little bit picky, but if you look at the scene as a whole and take in the beauty of the scene, it's without a shadow of a doubt, it's of a very, very high standard, and I don't get these very often, and this is one of the images that I'm really pleased with and look back fondly upon. There's a couple of little trees in the background that you could argue are a little bit distracting, but come on, it's a woodland at the end of the day. That image is one of my favourite all-time images, and for that reason I will easily give that a 5. So my next image, which is a 5, is completely different to the one you've just seen. It's not representative at all. It's more creative, more abstract, more pictorial, more intriguing, and really challenges the viewer, and that's the sort of photography that I love to engage in. It's just that little bit different, raising the bar all the time and trying to come up with new ideas, and when those new ideas work, my goodness, do they really work. Now again, it's very subjective, not to everybody's taste, but the images that I took in my last video about seeing all the faces in the water really struck a chord with me, not because it was weird, but just because it was different, and I love anything like that. Now if you got this image in front of a judging panel, for example, probably the biggest majority of them would not gravitate towards them. I think with the videos, I think you need a little bit of a story as well to help you understand what you're seeing. You need maybe an extended caption if you were looking in a gallery, and that story goes along with raising the bar for those types of images. But certainly if someone had been stood by the side of me on the bridge when I took those images, they would not have seen what I saw. Now granted, I probably didn't see the faces on the day, but I knew what I was working towards all the time with the shutter speeds, trying to get them the differences, and trying to get the little water movement to look like pencil drawings. I knew that was what I wanted to create, and that's what raises the bar up to that 5 mark, and it's pushing those boundaries that I love. Now I'm going to put all the images on again at the end, but I'm also going to put the very first image on that I took looking up the path this morning, and I'd like you all to try and score that how you would think it would score in your view. I've got an idea in my mind, but I'm keeping that to myself. So I'm going to leave it there and say thank you all ever so much for watching. Leave some comments below, let me know what you think of today's video. If you're not already a subscriber, don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell for those all important notifications. So until next time, thank you all so much. I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.